Okay, do we not need to also have common sense about taxation and people paying their tax bills that is due and that they were told would be due when they got their COVID payments?
Absolutely, and one of the things that we've seen with the temporary wage subsidy scheme and other supports is that there was no tax going to be gathered at that time due to the emergency nature of them, and a tax liability would accrue. Nobody knew at that time how long, obviously, the pandemic was going to last, and what we've got now is a large build-up of tax arrears for certain individuals. We're glad that we've been part of advocating for a long period of time where that tax can be gathered. So I think it's important for your listeners as they'll start to get the letters from Revenue showing that they may have anything up to 1,000 or more of a tax liability, that they need to be assured that that isn't going to be collected this year. Indeed, it'll be collected over a period of 4 years and only starting in 2022 by a reduction of tax credits. So you don't actually necessarily have to write a check or pay it back, but that option is available to you if you want. Where we do have issues, Shane, is that for one of these payments for a portion of the year last year, from March until August, that tax under law, that payment, the pandemic unemployment payment under law, was tax exempt. There's no ifs, buts or maybes. It was tax exempt. And what the government did was that they rewound the clock. They did something that was never done before in the history of tax legislation, and that is they retrospectively taxed it, which means that certain people will be getting bills or will have liabilities of anything up to €1,400 and will have to be paid back, as I said.
And we've spoken about this before with you on the programme, Pearse, and I think the point I made to you then, what if you were a low-paid essential worker making not much more, and in some cases less than people on the COVID payments were on? They had to pay tax during it, and you say it had never been done before. We'd never had a pandemic before. Like this was an anomaly that was tidied up by a piece of legislation because they wanted to rush through this payment to ensure people wouldn't be left on the breadline. It seems a little bit unfair to say, well, you rushed that through, but you can't look for tax now.
But Shane, when let me give you an example. When Dennis O'Brien,
I know you've given this example. You've given it before, Pearse. You can't compare. They've heard it. I heard you making it on this programme before. You can't compare a complex corporate tax deal to income tax. It's just it's apples and oranges.
No, actually, it's the exact same thing. It's not about the type of tax. It's about the principle. Do you decide to go back in time and say that something is now taxable that wasn't taxable under law? And that's the principle. We as I said, the pandemic unemployment payment is taxable. It is under law taxable since August. We hadn't an issue with that because of the issues that you've raised in terms of equity, in terms of low paid and other frontline workers. Of course, we didn't object to that. But where we do have an issue is that when something is not taxable under law because it is an exceptional needs payment, then it is absolutely inappropriate to go back in time and then say, oh, well, we're now going to tax it. It doesn't happen anywhere else. It doesn't happen with complex tax structures. It doesn't happen with vulture funds or anything else. And therefore, it shouldn't happen
Pearse,
with those who lost their jobs during the pandemic.
How do we pay for services if people don't pay tax? Everybody knew there was tax liable in this. I mean, you're playing politics with this. I have to put it to you.
Well, let me say this. I've said over and over again, I have no issue with the payment being taxed. What I do have an issue with is going back in time and retrospectively taxing a payment. And this isn't just called out by Sinn Féin. Others, like I think it's the FLAC, have called this out. There is serious questions in relation to why, for the first time ever, we have decided in tax law to go back in time and say that something that was legally not taxable is now taxable, and why the government chose this issue for people who lost their jobs during a pandemic to actually collect what isn't going to be a huge amount of money in the round of things, but actually doesn't do it for other structures. And I'm talking about structures which we're not talking about a number of millions, but actually in some cases where you're talking about billions of euro, which are the loopholes are exploited in terms of our tax code. But it's never ever done.